Welcome GMs to the Week 7 video. Starting off, I'm going to do a positional player of the week. For the quarterback, I have to obviously give this one to Aaron Rodgers. He had almost 40 fantasy points. He looked very mean in the game and upset, and he came out with a 42-24 win over Houston. Very crucial win, and the Green Bay Packers are starting to look like the team that they were the last couple of years. Looking in the wide receivers, I again decided to do two this week. Jordy Nelson, obviously, going on the same team as Aaron Rodgers, clearly he had to throw to somebody, and Jordy Nelson ended up being that guy with 3 touchdowns and over 120 yards. Dez Bryant is a surprise here. He's been very inconsistent this year, but because he got 2 touchdowns and almost 100 yards, I have to put him as the one of the wide receivers of the week. The running back of the week is the biggest surprise you could possibly imagine, I would say. Sean Green. He has only had one good week this year, which was the first week, getting 15 points. This week he has 161 yards, and he had 3 touchdowns as well for 34 points, almost catching up to Aaron Rodgers for fantasy points. So a very surprising week. I don't expect anything like that to happen again. I expected him to get about 4 points, and he ended up beating that by 30 points. The tight end of the week, somebody that has been playing not the greatest this year. He's been struggling so far, and it looks like he might be able to get his rhythm back. Antonio Gates, one of the best tight ends in the league and has been for some time now, got 81 receiving yards and 2 touchdowns, and that was pretty crucial for the Chargers as well, and for Superchargers. Looking at the rookie watch, Robert Griffin III, I'm still going to put as the number 1 here, just because he has a better completion rate, and not only can he pass the ball, and he has 100 yards or so less than Andrew Luck, but he has almost 400 rushing yards, and he has 5 touchdowns. So he's looking like a good quarterback so far. The only issue is he's a little crazy with his running, and could develop concussion problems, getting hit hard by a linebacker. So Andrew Luck, definitely the number 2 right now. There's nobody else really competing with Griffin and Luck right now. His completion rate's not the greatest, but he has time to develop. The Colts are looking at him as a franchise quarterback. They don't need him to perform the best now. They're not the greatest team anyways, so they just need him to develop as a franchise quarterback. And he has 7 touchdowns and 7 interceptions. Russell Wilson, I'm still going to put as the number 3 here, above guys like Tannehill and Whedon. His completion rate is pretty good with a 62.5, 1,100 yards, and he also can rush the ball a little bit too. His TD to INT ratio is better than the other guys, so I'm going to put him as the number 3. But really, there is no competition between Griffin, Luck, and Wilson. I think those are the top 3, but clearly the top 2 are the big guys there. The running backs, Alfred Morris still at the top. The most surprising of the rookies here, drafted in the 6th round, and is completely dominating the rookies for running back spot. He has 562 all-purpose yards, a 4.6 average, and 5 touchdowns. Trent Richardson's looking pretty good right now as well, but his average is only 3.6. Alfred Morris is beating him by a whole yard per carry. Doug Martin, number 3. Quite a significant drop there. He's basically 100 all-purpose yards less, and his average is a little bit better, yeah, but he also has 4 less touchdowns. I think right now, just like the quarterbacks, the top 2 are the ones dominating. Doug Martin has a little bit ways to go. Played well on Boise State, but he's a guy that's going to take a little bit longer to develop than Trent Richardson, who was expected to be in here and be the number 1. The wide receivers are starting to be some more guys coming in here. Kendall Wright, he's the guy that's had the most receptions so far and the most targets out of all the receivers, and that's why I have to put him at the top. He's getting utilized the most. Number 2, though, a guy that we didn't really expect to get a lot of attention this year. He was going to be a guy that would get attention in the next year or the year after, is Josh Gordon. He's a huge deep threat guy, and he's been putting up, I think it's 36 points right now in 2 weeks, and he's just dominating right now. 3 touchdowns, a 22.8 average. He's just doing everything that the Cleveland Browns need that Greg Little's not. And he's almost catching Kendall Wright in the course of a couple of games. Alshon Jeffrey I'm going to put ahead of Stephen Hill right now. Even though Stephen Hill has another touchdown, the only reason why Stephen Hill even is close is because of the first game he's had. He's very inconsistent, and he's only had 2 games right now that he's actually done well. Alshon Jeffrey may not be quite as a big hit-or-miss guy. He's just a little more consistent at the average level. And I think that he's going to develop into a better wide receiver throughout time. Looking at the deals, there's only one big deal that's happened, and it was a definite big deal. Robert Griffin III got dealt with this. In this deal, I'm going to have to say Beast Mode got the better deal in my opinion. I think even though they gave up Stephen Ridley, I'm going to have to say that getting RG3 and Brandon Lloyd is a huge bonus for him. He likes Brandon Lloyd. He loves the Pats, so I understand that giving Ridley up is a huge problem for him. But he got a running back in return. Anquan Boldin is born in 81, so he's not exactly the youngest guy. And Joe Flacco's decent, but RG3 is the guy that's going to be on Beast Mode's team for the long haul. So I think a team that's trying to develop and trying to completely change the face of his team needs a guy like RG3, and I think he's starting to get a team that he likes, and he's completely rebuilding, and I think this is a great deal for Beast Mode. It's not a bad deal for Stone Cold, but I think overall Beast Mode does get the benefit of this. I'm going to do the team rankings again. Dante, I have to say, I finally put him up in the top 3. After going 5-1 and being the number 1 right now, his team finds ways to win. Guys come out with big weeks, and I think having Fred Jackson and Doug Martin, decent running backs. I didn't know what Jackson would do with Spiller, but they're a huge run team now because they have that. They use them in different ways that they need to, and I think he doesn't have anything to worry about when he has Welker and Brandon Marshall as well, and Matt Ryan. So I think he has a pretty good team. Owen Daniels is performing at a great pace as well. He's doing really good. One of the biggest targets outside of Andre Johnson for the Houston Texans. So I have to put him as the number 3 right now, just ahead of the bus just because of the standings. They're both tied at 5-1, but he's the most surprising, so I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt for now. Another guy that moved up is Gridiron. I think having 3 good wide receivers now, his team looks good. Sean Green may not be the best running back ever, but he has Reggie Bush to go along with that. And those two together complement each other enough that they can basically assume that he'd get about 20 points for those running backs. And he has, between Calvin Johnson, Julio Jones, and Dez Bryant, and Matt Stafford, he has a good set of wide receivers and quarterback to go along with that. So he has a pretty deep team, and I like where he's going with it, and I think I have to give him a top 6 right now. Benchwarmers. With Randall Cobb, he's just doing unreal with Jennings gone. I think that he has Macklin and Kenny Britt as well, so he has an option here to do things that he needs to do with Randall Cobb as the number 3. That's a decent option because there's a lot of the times where he may be a little inconsistent, but he at least is still going to be able to get a touchdown or so, or have a huge game, and he's finding ways to win as well with Ryan Matthews and Michael LaShure, and Aaron Rodgers obviously being the best quarterback. I like his team, but until he gets a little more depth at wide receiver or running back, I think that he's going to be a little bit below Gridiron. We'll see in the next week or 2 how they both perform, and it could change. Anything goes, I have to say right now. Based on the standings, I have to give him just an 8th spot just because of his keepers. I'm still really liking his keepers. Brian Hartline's performing at an unreal amount. I don't expect him to keep that up. I mean, they don't really have any other targets, so he'll do decent. But outside of those guys, outside of Hartline and Johnson, he doesn't really have a deep receiver core. He has Andre Roberts, who's a decent complement for Larry Fitz, but he needs wide receiver help, that's for sure. So I'm still going to give him a top 8 for now. We'll see how he does in the next week or 2 as well, and he could drop depending on how he does. Gold Standard, they were 3rd, but going 2-4, I have to say I'm putting him in the top 10 for now. But, I mean, he has a good-looking team. They just aren't winning games because he does have a huge emphasis on the Steelers with his offense, having the two wide receivers and the quarterback for their team. So if they don't do the best on the pass, then he's completely screwed. And I just think for some reason that he's not winning games. So until he can start winning weeks, he's dropping huge right now. Another guy that's dropping at an unreal pace is myself. I don't like my team. I think outside of my keepers, I don't have any depth whatsoever. And I'm selling, and I'm calling it quits for the year. I think that my keepers are a great set of keepers. But outside of that, I've had wide receiver problems all year long. And without me willing to give up my picks to gain some wide receivers, there's nowhere for me to go except for hope that my team can get a huge week and win. So I'm putting myself down, especially after making some trades, getting rid of Steve Smith. I have to say that I'm putting myself way down from where I was before. Superchargers still at the bottom. Basically, the bottom two are going to stay that way. They've both sold out. So along with myself, there's basically 4 or 5 teams that are pretty doomed and pretty unlikely to make the playoffs. Looking now, here's an early look at the playoffs just because there are teams that are tied at 3-3, about 7 teams or so that are tied there. Basically, there's teams that are going to be looking to make a win. If they don't get the win, they might be selling out. There's already teams that are selling out. There's teams that are buying huge because they need to make the playoffs. So I just want you guys to have an early look at the playoffs to see what exactly you're situated in. Basically, there's 4 teams that I think are most likely going to make the playoffs. There's 3 teams that are at 5-1 right now. Essentially, the golden number for me is a 7-6 record. If you can get a 7-6 record, there's a good chance of you making the playoffs. So essentially, these 3 teams only need 2 more wins in the next 7 weeks. I think that's very likely to do. So I'm giving them the benefit of the doubt and saying that there's a guaranteed chance that they're making it into the playoffs. Halababa still love his team. So I'm going to have to say that he's definitely going to be making the playoffs as well. I'll be very, very surprised if for some reason he doesn't, unless there's injury problems on his team. That's the only way in my eyes that he's not going to make the playoffs. In my eyes as well, there's 5 teams that are doomed and not making the playoffs, as I stated earlier. That would be myself, having sold any last hope that I had in the receiver section, leaving nothing but my keepers left, and now trying to get picks. I've made the list of not making the playoffs. James Reddy, still not convinced. Even if he got Michael Vick, I think he still has issues with most of his team because he had such a great receiver core. He doesn't have that anymore, and with guys like Mendenhall getting hurt, his running back situation is struggling. So I just think that out of the guys that are in the white right now, he's at the bottom of that, and I think that it's fair enough to say he's not going to make the playoffs. So he's just barely in the red marker, but I'm still going to say right now he's not making the playoffs. The bottom 3 teams here, they've pretty much sold out. They've said they've sold out. They're trying to get picks now, and they're selling any little bit left that they have of depth on their team. So essentially there's 5 teams. I would suggest James Reddy probably doing the same thing as the 4 of us have done, because I think it's very unlikely for him to make the playoffs. The teams in the white, I think for Gold Standard and Tank, they still have the weakest division in my opinion. I think the only way Gold Standard's making the playoffs is if he wins the division. I think Tank Destruction, if he doesn't win the division, has a chance of sneaking in the 8th spot. Otherwise, I'm going to have to say that it's still going to be Tank Destruction taking 4th, the division, Gold Standard not making it. Anything goes with his record. I don't think he's making the playoffs either. Personally, I think WWJD and Gridiron have a good chance of making playoffs. Gridiron has a better week, and I think WWJD, even though he's playing, in my eyes, the hardest division, I think he can still make it in. Benchwarmers, I'm going to give the edge over Stone Cold, and I think that based on the team he's playing, the way he's been playing lately, I think he's going to make it. So thanks again for another week, and good day.